So we're going to learn these PowerShell structures and functions and techniques. And we're going to do it from the perspective of just having fun with it, making a game with it, or sort of a silly project. Then later, as we've learned the language itself, we can use it to do things like manage mailboxes and Exchange, or control Security and Compliance Center, or manage SharePoint or Active Directory or something like that. So some of the very simple projects we'll be working on, number guessing games. So we'll go through, say, a number guessing game, and we will ask the player to choose a level of difficulty, and then use logic, decision structures, if and else, and looping, and functions, modules of code to do things with that. So I'll choose a level of difficulty. I'll choose 2 for normal. Guessing for number 1. Number 1 is between 1 and 10. I get 3 guesses for this number. 5. Number was bigger. 7. Number is bigger. 8. Number is bigger. And number was 10. So I wouldn't have guessed that. Guessing for number 2. Again, I would start at 5. Number is bigger. 7. I did it. I guessed the number. So moving on to number 3. I'll start it at 5 again. Number was smaller. I'll go to 3. I did it. I guessed the number. Final score of all 3 numbers, I guessed 2 out of 3 and got that right. And again, we will go over things like data types, variables, comparisons, looping, while true, and for loops, okay? If and else and nested if else, and decision structures nested inside of each other. Switch statements. All of that we will apply towards creating hopefully entertaining or fun projects as we learn the language. All right, so from that, we will go into like functions, and we'll create several versions of a Pokemon game. And we'll look at, this is, in sort of the chapter or the section of videos where we'll go over writing code and functions and breaking our code into smaller modules. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you create a more sophisticated and complex program or script? You break it up into smaller functions that are more manageable and editable and modifiable than code that is simply all lumped together in a ball of spaghetti in one script. So in this case, we'll have a main menu, and we will allow the user to choose to create a Pokemon, and we'll let them do different things with their Pokemon, and we'll finally, in the end, once they have created their Pokemon and the opponent, we'll write a function or method that lets our Pokemon duel with each other. And it will make use of all kinds of decision structures that we'll cover, and repetition structures, looping, while true, switch statement, if and else. So the idea is to practice using these techniques, using these PowerShell structures in a way that is agnostic, so that we're focusing on the language, learning the language, and not just using a commandlet here and there to manage Exchange, or to, you can do that for years and you'll never truly learn PowerShell if all you do is Google a commandlet and use that to do something. It's not going to help you write large, complex scripts that do what you want. If you want to get there, you need to actually learn the language. You need to learn the logic behind it, and you've got to expand your palette of colors that you can paint with in terms of coding. You want to get past just having only 2 colors or 3 colors. You want to have 100 colors. So that's sort of the goal here, and hopefully using these projects. So from that, actually let's run that. Let me grab version 3 here. All right, so version 3. Here's our Pokemon tournament right here. And using all their structures. Create a Pokemon. So we'll create a Pokemon. I'm going to choose a Mimikyu. I'll give it my name. And And random stats assigned, a new Pokemon is born. Let me display the Pokemon, or hang on. Let me display the Pokemon I just created. So there's my Mimikyu, Carly. I'm going to create an opponent. And I'll get a randomly selected opponent. In this case, I got a Pikachu. His name's Ginger, but he's male. Cool, huh? I guess he's a Ginger. New opponent is born, and I can display the opponent. 4. And now let's go ahead and put them into a tournament. So we'll lock them into a duel. And based on random stats and attack and defense added in our algorithm, we'll deduct damage from these opponents. And the combat is somewhat randomized to see who actually wins. Looks like so far I'm doing better than Ginger. Ginger's only got 13 HP. Carly's got 58. Oop, Carly's down to 33. Oop, Ginger hit -1. Ginger's out of the game. Carly wins the tournament, okay? So again, the purpose of this is to actually learn the language of PowerShell, not to just grab a commandlet here and there and pass in a few parameters or arguments, but to create something that's a little bit more interesting, more fun. In this case, 350 lines of code, and our programs, our examples, our projects will get more interesting, more sophisticated from here. So there's our Pokemon. Let's see, Megapet, commandlet argument. We'll look at parameters, commandlet arguments later. Something as simple as creating a ping sweeper. And we could add additional functionality to this. I'm gonna go ahead and run it. So it'll start out number of hosts per subnet, 256, not counting 0, for the network, and 255 for the broadcast value in the adjust. But 192.168.1, we'll go through that and we'll ping. And we can add more code in here, if and else, or a switch statement. If we get echo replies, save it to a CSV. Hey, that IP is valid. There's something there. And then maybe later we could scan the ports on that IP. Or, hey, no echo replies. There's nothing there. Save that to a file. This IP is free. If I want to, then I can, make a server, create a VM, and assign a static IP because no value was returned. But just an example of something simple that we can do with PowerShell, and yet kind of fun, kind of interesting. Make a ping sweeper, make a port scanner. If you want to, you could expand that and add 20 different functions to it and several hundred lines of code and make a whole security script or a security suite, tools that you can run from PowerShell to do all kinds of, things on a network, or gather information about a network or Active Directory. So just another example, just another idea. Let's go from functions. We'll go into arrays where things get a bit more interesting or complex. Here we'll make a Mad Lib. You guys ever do that? Just makes a silly story. And this does several things. It will take an object that user types in, randomize it, and we'll also do some basic file access. We'll save it to a plain text file, and we'll read it from a text file. All right, so if I were to do that, enter to continue, let's create a story, a female person's name, I don't know, we'll use a Carly, an object, I don't know why laundry detergent's on my brain. An infinitive verb, eating. I like to do that a lot. An object or animal. I'm sort of obsessed with cats, so why not? Another object. A semi-truck. I don't know why that was on the brain, but it was. And let's see. Another object. A computer. A male person's name. Julius. Press enter to continue. All right, so let's read the story. One day, Carly was tiptoeing through the tulips when she saw a laundry detergent. This was because the folks at Microsoft were eating into the sky again and again. Her cat jumped off of a cliff because the semi-truck could not pat its head and rub its tummy at the same time. The computer ran off holding hands with Julius. The end. And let's say I wanted to save that story to a file. I could. In this case, I saved it to a file, and I were to quit. And then let's say I run this program again. And then if I wanted to, I could load my story and read it back from a file. And then if I wanted to read it, well, there it is. In this case, it saved the data. So we're covering file access, we're covering functions, we're covering input and output, if and else and decision structures and repetition structures in PowerShell. But hopefully we're doing it in a fun and interesting way. And in this case, we're also coding arrays, all right? So parallel arrays, single dimensional arrays, two-dimensional arrays, multi-dimensional arrays with 3 or 4 dimensions, you name it. And that's in sort of our section or our chapter on arrays. We'll look at quizzes. In this case, a quiz that's multi-dimensional and the code for that. And then also a quiz that's parallel dimensional. There's basically, we're doing the same thing logically, but syntactically our code's totally different. Because in one case we're using a 2-dimensional array, and in another case we're using 2 1-dimensional arrays that have a parallel relationship with each other. And we'll ask the user questions, and we'll store the answer, we'll compare the answer, we'll offer clues if they don't get it. We'll give them, say up to 3 guesses, and then after that, deduct a certain number of points from their score. All right, so that's another example. That's to learn arrays and to learn about arrays and how useful and powerful they can be when we combine them with looping. We will make a tic-tac-toe game. And in that tic-tac-toe game, we're going to use an array to represent the board, the playing board. And we're going to code some very simple AI. So check for our winner. We'll look at how do we find the winning patterns in tic-tac-toe in the game, and how do we translate it into code so that we can actually tell the computer how to play a human player. And so we'll take a look at that here. And it's a very simple game. So it's a good place to start. And in about 330 lines of code or 333 lines of code, we'll write a game that does this. So game uses very simple AI. Do I want our computer to be intelligent or simple? If I choose S for simple, it disables some of the decision-making processes in the AI, so the computer is easier to beat. If I choose intelligent, it won't be so easy to beat. Do I want the first move, or do I let the computer have the first move? I'll say no. I'll give the computer first move. Of course, the computer is a jerk, so he'd choose the center square. Where do I want to go? I'm going to go in the top left square. So the computer, he's trying to win, and I've got to block him. See, he could get bing, bing, bing here. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to go 6 to hit that bottom left square. Okay, so I blocked him. Oh, but now he's trying to win here. Oh my gosh, I'm going to block him again. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to go right here. In the right middle row there. Now, not a whole lot of methods in this case, so it looks like it's just going to be a tie. Neither one of us can really win this. But I'll choose, in this case, the top middle position there. And in this case, this game ends in a tie, and neither you nor the computer wins. So just a basic tic-tac-toe game in the console. Obviously, nothing great compared to today's 3D first-person shooters and all, but this is something simple that you can code in a relatively short amount of time. It's only 333 lines of code. It does, and it will let you see how some basic decision logic works inside of a game. How do you take what a human would do if you were playing a human, and how do you then represent that in code? How do you code that out and get the computer to do it so it can act like a human opponent? So very rudimentary, very simplistic game, nothing like a chess game or anything, but tic-tac-toe is something simple that it allows you to learn all these PowerShell techniques and structures like switch statements and while true loops, repetition structures, if and else if and nested if and else structures and switch statements, input and output and arrays and two-dimensional arrays and multi-dimensional arrays and parallel arrays, for loops, things like that. So just a way of looking at that. Okay, do a word guessing game. Let's see. Then we go over classes. Classes get a little more interesting. Here we'll make a Godzilla and a Mothra. And then we'll code a monster combat function that sort of lets them duel to the death or duke it out. And so here we go. So we build a Godzilla. We write a Godzilla class, which is like a blueprint or a user-defined data type. So you can define your own data types. We're not limited to just integers and strings and built-in things with PowerShell. We can write our own data types, like we can make monsters and Godzillas and Mothras, and hit enter. And here's our combat function. Here's what they start out with and their points. And we'll pause. We'll look at how to do all this in PowerShell. I'm just going to sort of duke it out. Ooh, looks like Mothra's going down. He's got only 9. Oh, ooh, man, that was a heavy hit. He knocked Godzilla down to 35 in one blow. Uh-oh, post-mortem. Godzilla wiped Mothra out. Godzilla wins the tournament. So, again, just hopefully a fun or interesting way of learning some of these PowerShell structures. We will look at a Blackjack game. How would we code Blackjack? Well, we're going to look at constants and symbolic constants. We're going to look at global versus local scope with variables, how to use new object and how to instantiate or build objects that we have defined ourselves or created. In this case, we write a card class object to represent cards. And we build an array that holds an entire deck of cards, 52 cards. And we will code the logic for playing blackjack. So if you were playing a human player or playing a human dealer in a casino, how would they decide if you win or lose, if you're busted or if you're under or if you're over, greater than, less than? So we just have to translate that behavior into code. Very simplistic, very basic AI. Not anywhere complex like a modern complex game, but this is something that we can code in a few hundred lines of code using all of these PowerShell techniques and structures. And by the time we get done with this project and we get all the bugs worked out of it and make mistakes and break it and fix it and break it and fix it hundreds of times, and you'll think of ways you want to change it and edit it and improve it, then you'll learn, I've learned all these structures. How to write classes, how to write multidimensional arrays and instantiate class objects, how to use for loops and while true loops and if and else if and nested if else and switch, and how to call a function and how to write a function. All right. So this project is basically about 638 lines of code. Still not really a very large project, but by the time we get done with this, you will have absorbed, you will have learned a lot of different PowerShell structures and objects and tools and techniques that you can use in your scripting and your programs. And then you can apply that towards doing things like managing Exchange Online or security and compliance or Active Directory or SharePoint or, you name it. So this is sort of an agnostic or fun way to learn that. And we will go from that to a basic checkers game, okay? Again, we'll look at how do we create a checkers board. In this case, we'll use a two-dimensional array, all right? 64 squares, right? 8 rows by 8 columns. So two-dimensional array. We'll go through, we'll build or instantiate the board. Then we have to look at how do we code the logic of movement? How do we get the computer to go by the same logic that a human player would go by? How do we translate that into code? That's going to be a lot of looping and a lot of nested if-else structures and things, okay? Just selecting a checker and moving it. Look at all these nested if-else structures here. And moving a checker And there's so many different ways the player could choose to move that would be invalid or would be cheating. We can't let them go sideways. They have to move diagonal, and unless they're a king, they can't move backwards. And they can't move on top of one of their own checkers if it's already there, and they can't move on top of their opponent's checker if it's there. And we've got to figure out how to code all of the logic for that. So it's going to be a lot of nesting if and else structures, lots of layers of nesting, and making more complex decisions with our logic, in our code. And so this is a good exercise for that. Again, checkers is still much more simplistic than chess. Chess would have to be a lot more complicated, have a lot more nesting, a lot more decision structures involved, but we'll just look at a simple checkers game and go through that. So if I were to run this code, what does it look like? Let's play checkers. So we build a checkerboard, we populate it with checkers from the checker class object that we wrote. Who do we wish to play? I'm going to choose the computer. What's your name? Curly here. Do you want to be red or black? I'm going to be red because it's easier for me to. So on the board, I can only choose these objects. I couldn't choose these objects. That's the opponents. I can only choose these, right? So I want to move this checker here. And I can only move it diagonal. I can't move it straight forward, and I can't move it sideways, and I can't jump it. There's nothing to jump. And it's not a king, so I can't go backwards. So all of that has to be coded in my logic. That's a lot of nested if and else going on there, right? I have to code out all those contingencies and compare and know. And then here's my score. So first I want to select it. So in this case, I want to select 3, 1, right? Row 3, column 1. So notice I put some parentheses around it when I selected. That lets me know that I've selected it. And then what do I want to do? I can't jump an opponent. There's no opponent there. So I want to move my checker to another location. I'll select M. Where do I wish to move it? I'm going to choose to move it here to 4, 2. Okay, so 4, 2. That is an acceptable and legal move. And notice that I moved my checker here, okay? There's my checker there. And then I'd have to go in and give the computer his move. All right, so we'll look at that. And this project, a little bit more lengthy, a little bit more sophisticated. By the time we get to the end of this project, this is 1,725 lines of code, right? So we're getting a little bit more interesting, a little bit more sophisticated in our logic and what we want to do, in using our PowerShell as a language, okay? So we looked at Blackjack, checkers, Tic Tac Toe, monster combat, Pokemon combat. Then finally, we're going to create an RPG, a role-playing game. And we'll look at globals and constants and a local scope. And we'll look at creating an abstract data type or a base class. We'll look at an inheritance hierarchy, writing polymorphic code, how to do a lot more with less code by capitalizing on the advantages and the features of classes and inheritance, and of having or coding an inheritance hierarchy, and of making abstract data types or base classes and derived classes and member methods and member data. So again, there's our base class, and we'll write characters and entities and giants and monsters and dragons and druids and shamans and fighters and elves, and we'll code all of these classes of object. We'll look at using magic and using weapons, all right, in our game. We'll look at how to code inventory and store inventory items in our game. We'll look at all of these different options here. We'll look at, talking with non-player characters, NPCs, and how can we sort of create a randomize a conversation so that the player can have a conversation with an NPC. And we'll look at that. And that's just in building classes. And then we'll code functions to use that, and we'll code menus. and a help system, and an inventory use system. And this project, when we get to the end of it, it's 3,051 lines of code, right? And it's a very simple RPG. How do we code a map so that we can walk around in the map and find items and fight different entities and things. And so if I run this program, new game, let's create a new game. All right, beginning a new campaign, press enter to continue. I have to choose a character's class. So I can choose warrior, mage, fighter, elf, shaman. I'm going to choose an elf, so I can use both weapons and magic. Not as great as a warrior, and not as adept with magic as a mage, but sort of an in-between character, a hybrid character. I'll call my character Carly. And so I awake from what appears to be a disturbing dream, knowing neither where I've been or how I got there. Just sort of sets the scene. Basic intro. I hit enter. All right, here are my stats. Attack, defense, my HP. I have no weapons, haven't found anything yet, no armor. So what will I do? I can look around. I can try the gates. In this case, ooh, what have I got here? So let's go ahead and run this code, and we'll start a new game. And I can choose warrior, mage, fighter, elf, shaman. I'm going to choose elf, which is a hybrid character. Not as strong with weapons as a warrior, not as adept at magic as a mage, but sort of a hybrid in-between character. I'll name my character Carly. Choose a gender. I awake from what appears to be a disturbing dream. It just sort of sets the scene here, the intro. Press any key to continue. And I start out, I'm in location center 1. Here are my stats, my player stats. Carly, female, HP. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go navigate, and I'm going to go west. So I go from the center location there to west 1. I arrive at an abandoned farmhouse. I see a picket fence, a rustic dilapidated barn, and a decaying hovel that used to be someone's residence. There are chickens walking around the premises. To the south I see. And what do? I'm going to go west again. Now I'm in west 2. I find myself walking in golden fields of wheat. I'll go west again. And there's nothing there. I'm going to go north. In this case, I find a longbow and 20 arrows. And it adds it to my inventory. And then I'm going to go walk south, and I find a healing potion. Okay. And I have an options method. So if I were to call that from options, the options menu, I can choose my inventory. I have a longbow, I have 20 arrows, and I have a healing potion. And I could also save or load my character, and I could display my stats. Carly, my gender, my HP, defense, attack, experience, and so on. Haven't selected a weapon yet. So let's say that I want to select a weapon. Okay, so I'm going to say use an inventory item. And then here are my options that I can select. I'm going to choose the longbow in this case. So, and, oh, sorry. I hit the wrong. Let me choose the longbow, so I want to use an inventory item, and let me hit L. I hit 1 instead of L. Alright, so now I selected weapon as longbow. Okay, and if I were to display my stats, instead of nothing but my fist, now I have a longbow that I can use in battle. So let's exit, and I'm still at the west 2 location. Alright, so now I'm going to go east. And this time I'm going to go south. And oh no, in this case, I ran into an opponent. What happens? It's a giant. So I'm building and instantiating a giant class object. I have currently selected my longbow. I haven't found any armor yet, but I do have a healing potion. That might come in handy. This is my last chance before I get engaged in combat. I'm going to go ahead and drink that healing potion and raise my HP because I might need it. So I'm going to choose H. All right, so I drank the healing potion, feel much better. My HP was 200. And in this case, I don't have any magic abilities, so I can't really do much here. So currently select of magic is none. So here we go in combat. I'm fighting the giant Gotham. And Gotham, these are his stats. And it will go through an attack sequence. Kali fires an arrow. So it subtracts from my number of arrows. And then here's the random damage I did. And then my attack, that's a measure of my combat experience or my combat skill. So 5 is added because of my experience or my combat skill, making it a total of 54. So after the attack, Gotham's left with 35 HP and I have 210 because I drank that healing potion. Okay, that was me attacking Gotham. Now Gotham is attacking me. All right. And notice he knocked me down from 210 to 197, but I'm still doing pretty good here. And he's only got 35. I fire another arrow. I started with 20, but I've used 2 now. So I'm down to 18 arrows. When I get to 0, I won't be able to use my longbow anymore. And that knocks Gotham down to 8. So he's still alive. Now he gets to take another swing at me. So 11 generated just out of pure luck. His combat experience or attack rate adds another 5. But my defense reduces his damage by 5. It's my defensive skill. So how I'm able to dodge. In this case, I'm left with 186. He has 8. I used my third arrow. I'm down to 17. Random amount of 4 damage. Not a lot. But 9 damage is added from the arrow. 5 from my attack skill. Gotham's final HP is 0. He's been defeated. Curly is the sole survivor of this battle. Gotham was terminated with extreme prejudice. Okay. I absorb 50 points of magic energy, and because I defeat him, I find a scroll, and it teaches me the magic spell for creating fireballs. So it's sort of like Dungeons and Dragons. If you ever played the Dungeons and Dragons game, I think I kind of totally pirated or stole a lot of these ideas from D&D, but you know, it's just something fun we can do with code. So we can code this into a game. So now I have different options, all right? Now that I've defeated him, and I had to pull him out of my environment. So if I go back to that area, I see the corpse of the giant that I recently dispatched. I want to make sure that I take him out of my game environment. And when I write my save function and my load function, I have to be able to save all the attributes of my character object, as well as all the game state variables. So we'll talk about that and how to do that in these different tutorials, this series of videos, when we get to this level of project. And in this case, let's look at my options and in my inventory list. So I used 3 arrows. I have 17 left. I still have my longbow. Let's look at my magic abilities. I finally have one now. I have fire. If I want to, I can equip that. So if I wanted to equip fire, in this case, I charge a plasma ball with magic energy. All right. And now, if I bring up and display my stats, look what it says. Selected weapon is no longer, my fists, but I have a longbow. And my selected magic is no longer nothing. I've learned the technique for creating fireballs. And so now my selected magic is fire. So now I can use that in combat, in my next combat sequence. Okay? And, again, like I said, this will go over a lot in terms of instantiating things and saving things to files and nesting and coding your logic and using an inheritance hierarchy and writing polymorphic code. But hopefully it'll make it fun. This is, rather than just going through a PowerPoint and talking about those things, I hope you actually kinesthetically do them. Write the code, tweak the code, change the code, make it do more. I just have some very basic code here. I wrote 3,500 lines. I want to see your game be 7,000 lines or 10,000 lines of code. Do something really cool with it. But the point is that once you've learned all these techniques and all of these structures, then you can use them for other things like managing Active Directory or managing Exchange. And then you will really know the language of PowerShell and how to code, more robust and sophisticated logic into your scripts instead of, just going out and grabbing a commandlet and Googling a few parameters and, come on, that might do what you want and get you out of a bind momentarily, but it's not really that much different than using a GUI. You're not really automating anything, and you're not really doing what you want. What you want is to be able to write and create and build things with PowerShell that free you up and that automate processes and things. And so I feel like if you take some time to focus agnostically on learning the language instead of just grabbing a specific commandlet and the parameter to solve your immediate problem, it's only going to benefit you in the future. So again, look, saving a character. How do we serialize a class and save all those data members to a CSV file? And then how would we load data from a class and save that into a CSV file? And save the game state data. We've got to save the game state data too. It's not just what's in the character, but has the giant been defeated? Or is the giant still alive? And the combat sequence with the giant hasn't happened yet. Did the player find the longbow? Or is the longbow still hidden there in that location on the map? All that data has to be saved, right? And so we'll look at saving that. I'm going to save a character. There, in this case, we've saved our character. So there's a CSV file that stores our character state, and there's a CSV file that stores our game state. Okay? And exit. And let's go ahead and leave the game here. And we'll quit the game. Okay? So we quit the game, and if I were to run the game again, and I want to load my game state, I'll hit L to load my game state. Have to load all that data back in. In this case, the name of my saved game files, enter name of character to load. Carly. All right. So here I am, back in the game, and in the location on which I saved it. And this is the location where I formerly fought the giant. So if I go south again, well, look, I saved the game state. That giant's already been defeated, and I don't have to fight him again. And look at my stats. The longbow, and there's the fireball spell. Those are my stats. So I want to make sure that I save all of that. But this can be a very entertaining, fun, interesting way to learn any programming language. Make a game out of it. Make a project out of it. Instead of listening to someone go through a boring PowerPoint presentation and it really means nothing to you when you forget most of it, use it in a project. Do something kinesthetic. Be tactile with it. You know what I'm saying? You'll remember it 10 times better if you actually do something with it and write the code. So again, I will put the source for all of these types of projects. Put them up somewhere, GitHub or YouTube, or I don't know, I'll find someplace. But if you just copy and paste this into ICE and change a few lines and try to say, hey, this is my code, you're not going to get anything out of these videos, and you're not going to learn the language. It's not going to work. That would be like going to the gym and watching somebody work out and lift weights. You could watch them all day long. You could even claim that you were the one who went to the gym, and you could claim that you were the one who worked out, but it wouldn't put any muscles on your arms and legs. You wouldn't get buff at all. You know what I'm saying? You're only going to get buff. You're only going to generate real muscle if you yourself do the work. If you don't take shortcuts. If you yourself lift those weights and you work out, then you'll get a buff body. But you can't just watch somebody else do it for you. It doesn't work that way. And coding's the same way. You can't watch somebody code for you or just copy and paste their code into ICE or into a compiler. It's something that you have to go through and debug yourself. Break it 100 times and fix it 100 times. Modify it, edit it, build upon it, change it. and then I believe it'll really stick. And last but not least, we're going to go through setting up GUIs. All right, we'll look at GUIs of file access, regular expressions. Oh, in the file access one, we will do an address book. All right, so just basically a simple database, and we'll call this friends, and we'll create a friend class, and we'll use it to save records. We'll look at how we can use CSV output and input to create a simple database. Again, PowerShell is not a language that you would really want to write a game or a database with. That's not the reason we're doing that with PowerShell. We're doing this with PowerShell to learn the language itself in an agnostic fashion, but in an entertaining and hopefully fun way. So F5, I'll run it, and I'm going to browse my friends by index. And let's do display friends. All right, so I have no friends at this point. How sad is that? I'm going to load friends from my text file. And then now, in this case, I want to display my friends. So these are the details of all my friend objects, right? And if I wanted to browse, all right, so these are browsing my friends. Finally, we're going to create some graphical user interfaces for our projects. After we cover regular expressions, but we will look at, all right, so this is our very first graphical form here. And we just create a window frame with PowerShell. I call it Unicorns and Rainbows, Curly Solali, Germany. And if I click go, Curly Solali says, hello world, and some radio buttons and such. Let's look at another GUI that we create. So here's a GUI for our RPG game. All right, so we're going to take like our basic RPG game. And a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it was a dark and stormy night. But basically, A Night in the Darkness, that game that we just looked at, with all those different features in the console, we're going to look at how to construct or build GUI forms for that game. So it's a more graphical user interface, okay? We'll also look at building a GUI interface for our calculator. Remember we built a calculator in the console? And we'll build a graphical interface calculator. And this will change the way we code. When you code with a GUI, with a graphical user interface on a Windows form, you have to do what's called event-based programming. And that changes the logic because in the console, we control the order in which the user inputs the numbers. But when we present to them a graphical user interface, they could hit any random number of buttons and, crash our program or destroy our logic, our code. And so you have to do a lot more bulletproofing. You have to think of a lot more contingencies and things that might go wrong when you code with a GUI or a graphical interface because it's event-based programming. But we'll talk about that. We'll go over that. So I hope this gives you a preview of all the things we'll cover in this series of videos. I'll try to break it into bite-sized pieces, and then from here, when we get through the basics, when we've learned the language in these agnostic, hopefully fun projects, then we'll take it into Exchange and Active Directory and SharePoint and doing some more work-related things with PowerShell. But there should be a honeymoon, right? If we're going to learn a new scripting language, shouldn't there at least be a honeymoon period where we could just kind of enjoy the language and have fun with it before we have to get down to the nitty-gritty? So hopefully this series of videos will be your PowerShell honeymoon.